Okay, so we're going to continue our sermon series, This Is Us. We're looking at these, what we've called these aspirational distinctives, these things that we are aspiring to be, but also we currently carry as well. So if someone was going to describe us, or describe what sort of church we're like, or describe what sort of people we are, these are some of the phrases we think embody what we're aiming at, what we're trying to represent in terms of what we feel is God's character kind of carried within us. So we've done a couple of weeks on this. In our first week, we looked at this statement. In our relationship with God, we try to be intimate, expectant, inspired, and led. So we try to encapsulate there some words that describe this real deep, real relationship we've got with God. Last week, Keely looked at the relationship with ourselves. We believe we are loved, accepted, and being transformed by God. So this was all about not just sort of carrying a belief, but actually how that belief informed us and changed us at the deepest level. To know that we're loved as we are, to know that we're secure in God's love is a transformational thing. It really changes our lives. This week I want to look at the third key relationship that we all have, and this is the relationship with other people. So this is a statement I've got on the screen today. In our relationship with others, we try to be honest, authentic, and interdependent. This is the relationship that's most on show. The other two, you could say, are kind of beneath the surface because, our relationship with God and our relationship with ourselves isn't kind of seen. But our relationship with others is the thing that's kind of clearly seen. We can see how we interact. We can see how others interact with each other. And so this one is more of a kind of a rubber hits the road one this week. This is more of what does it look like between us to kind of carry what we believe are these real key values of God. Notice I've included that word try in there again. We try to be honest, we try to be authentic, and we try to be interdependent, and recognize that we're on a journey. We're on a journey as people. These are aspirational statements. These are what we're aiming to be and aiming to carry. We've seen from the previous 2 weeks that God draws us into this intimate relationship when we begin to follow Christ. He draws us deeper into himself. He draws us to kind of reflect on this kind of transformational work within us. And also, he pulls us into this family, this weird and wonderful family called the church. He draws us into this family. He draws us into this big ecumenical bunch of people called the church. The church is God's idea. The church isn't a construct by people. The church is God's idea. The scripture says it's his manifold wisdom. It's God's best idea to get us together in a way that causes us to live out the values that he's put within us. It's like this sandbox environment where we get to kind of practice. That's all right. That's Jesus again calling this morning. It's this sandbox environment where we get to live out and practice. He's left a message. Live out and practice what faith really is. We get to test the authenticity of our faith, because it only gets tested when we get to work it out in an environment where we have to kind of demonstrate it and carry it. I watch a program called Forged in the Fire. Anybody else watch Forged in the Fire? Come on. Okay, this is about blacksmith. I'd love to be a blacksmith, by the way. Blacksmiths, they take all sorts of, on this program, take all sorts of random bits of metal, scrap metal or other bits of metal, and they have to form knives or swords or spears or different things from them. And now they beat the living daylights out of this metal, and they've got 3 hours to kind of form something, really effective, useful, but also beautiful, a piece of craftsmanship. And it's really intense, hard work. All these different guys and girls turn up and kind of have a go at Forged in Fire, and they produce some fantastic, things after just a few hours. And what they make can look really good, but then comes the testing. They have to have these weapons tested to see whether they can actually do what they're designed to do. So I've got a clip for you here from Forged in Fire.
Bladesmiths, this is the strength test, the wooden ramrod chop. To test the strength and durability of your edge, as well as the overall construction of your knives, I'll be chopping into this ramrod 10 times. Bob, you're up first. You ready?
No, but let's do it. Steel is a finicky little critter. Sometimes it works real good, sometimes it just snaps in your face. You'll never know until you test it. And there she goes. Feel like a punch in the gut.
Well, Bob, quite obviously, your blade broke.
Bob, your blade suffered a critical failure on the very first strike of the very first test.
Oops.
For that reason, I have to ask you to please leave the forge.
If you've never broken a blade as a bladesmith, you haven't bladesmith. I have no regrets. This is merely a stumbling block when you're walking down the street. You get up, you dust yourself off, and you move on. I came here to prove that I can make a knife under strenuous conditions in 3 hours. I did that. Win or lose, I did that.
There you go, there's Bob. Poor old Bob, blade, first strike, broke in half. We don't know what things are like until we test them. I like Bob because he's got a great attitude there. Nice friendly pat on the back from a competitor, I saw that's nice. But you know, Bob says you get up, you dust yourself down and you move on. So he had a good attitude to coping with the fact that his blade failed. But he also said this, he said steel is a finicky little critter. Sometimes it works really good, sometimes it just snaps in your face. You'll never know until you test it. You never know until you test it. And that's the same for the Christian faith. You never know whether it's going to hold until you test it. Is it going to really stand the test? Is it really going to be something that can be useful, can be applicable, can work on the ground? And the church is the testing ground for the Christian faith. God has designed this environment where we get to test and apply and try out these principles of Jesus, this empowering of the Spirit that the Bible talks about. And as we bump up against each other, we get to figure out whether this stuff really works. Does it really work? Because just like that knife hits that pole, is it going to stand? Is it going to stand the test of actually bumping up against people that aren't like us necessarily, don't carry the same opinions as us, maybe, have different attitudes towards us? How is our faith going to stand in that testing ground? In his letter to the church in Ephesus, the Apostle Paul, he wrote these words. He says, "You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which has been corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbour, for we're all members of one body." Paul is describing in this letter the transforming work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And he's using this kind of imagery of taking something off and putting something on, almost like clothes. We take off one set of clothes and we put on a new set of clothes. And he uses these terms of the old self and the new self. Now, the old self, he's trying to get you to imagine kind of the worst set of dirty, scruffy, old clothes that you can imagine, which he describes as being corrupted. These clothes are kind of corrupt. They're kind of rotten, these old clothes. And Paul's getting you to imagine taking off these old corrupt clothes and putting on a new set of clean clothes, which kind of represent the character and the transformation God is trying to bring in your lives. Now, if you're like me, you've got a set of old clothes at home. You haven't got a set of old clothes? Got your scruffs? Yeah? You get your scruffs on when you're doing some work in the garden, when you're doing some DIY, when you're doing some painting, And I quite like my scruffs, because when you get your scruffs on, you haven't got to worry about getting dirty. You haven't got to worry about spoiling them. And, I feel quite comfortable in them. I wouldn't come to church in them, but, I feel quite comfortable in my scruffs. It doesn't matter, what happens to them. I feel relaxed in them. But Paul isn't just talking about your scruffs here when he's talking about the old self. He's not talking about an old set of clothes that you just use for DIY. He's talking about something much more kind of fundamental. He wants you to know your old clothes, your old selves aren't just scruffy old clothes that you kind of, you wouldn't put on if you're going out somewhere nice. He wants you to know they really are kind of corrupt. They're kind of, Now, I want to give you a nice visual picture of what Paul is painting here. So have a look at this. This is classed as one of Tough Mudder's muddiest pictures, and I think they're probably right, aren't they? One of Tough Mudder's muddiest, dirtiest moments. And I think we can see, well, I can't imagine what's in that water, can you? I mean, that's just next level. But this is the imagery that Paul is trying to put in your mind. He doesn't want you to see your old self as something you just slip into or slip on when you want to feel comfortable. He wants you to know your old selves really are bad, stinking, yuck things that you don't want to necessarily return to. He wants you to see them as so filthy, you want to get as far away from them as possible. You want to take them off quickly. Now, can you imagine this guy finishing Tough Mudder, finishing the race, driving home as he is, getting home, hanging those clothes up in the wardrobe and thinking, I'm going to pop those on again someday just to remind me how much fun I had at Tough Mudder. Just popping those clothes back in the wardrobe just as they are so you can pop them back on again at any point in the future to remind yourself what a great day you had at Tough Mudder. I can imagine that most people, when they finish Tough Mudder, probably consign their clothes to the bin because they must get absolutely destroyed by that environment. Have you ever had some clothes that you've tried to clean but you can't get the stain out of? You know, whatever you try, you just can't get the stain out of. Or if you had some clothes that you failed to dry properly and they've got that kind of lovely lingering damp smell. I don't know when I first we first got married at our first house, we didn't have a tumble dryer. And in the winter, you're forever trying to dry clothes, you know, on clothes areas and radiators. And sometimes you didn't quite get them as dry as you wanted, and they had that lovely lingering damp smell that you couldn't quite shift. Or sometimes you leave something in the washing machine by mistake, and then you can never shift that because that kind of damp smell seems to live forever in those clothes. Something has corrupted that clothing, and you can't get rid of that smell. But the worst has got to be trainers. Once trainers go over, there is no bringing them back. You know, I don't care about sticking them in the washing machine. Once your trainers have gone over, there is literally no way of bringing those trainers back. One of my worst small group experiences in a church was sitting in someone's front room with someone's trainers who'd gone over. Now, I was sitting on the floor, and these trainers were probably about 2 feet from my face, and I can't describe what these trainers smelled like. They smelled like everything in the world that was bad. These trainers were utterly corrupt in their smell. The thing about trainers, from the outside they can look great, they can look really good on the outside, but inside there's something really bad happening. Now, either this person who was wearing them had gone completely nose blind and didn't realise their trainers were utterly corrupt, or they deceived themselves into thinking they were still okay. Either way, those trainers were bad. They were really, really bad. And Paul never wants us to think that our old selves have something attractive about them, something that we want to return to. Just like trainers that have gone over, they need to really just be, consigned to history. They need to be got rid of. They need to get away from as far as possible. Paul wants us to put on the new self. Now, I've got some lovely clean folded washing here to cleanse your minds. You can almost smell the fragrance, can't you? Some lovely, clean, fresh, folded washing to represent the new self that Paul is talking about. He says this: put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Now, between the old self and the new self, Paul says, there's the attitude of our minds, there's decisions that we have to make about what we want to do in applying the old self or the new self. We have decisions to make, choices to make. I have to make a choice. Which self do I want to put on? Do I want to put something on from the old self on, or do I want to put something from the new self on? Shall I go with the old self today, or shall I go with the new self today? When it comes to clothing, I'm pretty lazy. I've got to admit it. I tend to just reach into my wardrobe and pull out something I'm familiar with and stick it on. And I'm not fantastically bothered about clothes. Don't say you've noticed. But occasionally, I'll reach in my wardrobe and I'll pull something out that I bought with the best intention of wearing, or Keely bought me with the best intention of wearing, and I haven't got round to wearing it. And I'm going to actively make a choice today to put that piece of clothing on. I put it on, I think that looks actually quite nice. I'm quite glad I've got this piece of clothing. But I've had to actively choose to put on something new from my wardrobe. I've had to engage my mind with the new thing. It takes me a lot less energy to reach in my wardrobe and just grab something I'm familiar with and comfortable with. That's a much easier route to do. Any of you guys have a set of comfies that you get into when you get home? Busy day, you want to just relax, so you go upstairs, get your comfies on, your sweatpants, whatever else you wear, just things, elasticated waistband, all that sort of stuff. Just relax, chill, you got your comfies on. Again, it's so much easier to slip into things and put things on that we're familiar with and we're comfortable with. And it's just like that with our behaviours. We can have comfy, familiar behaviours that we just are so easy to slip on, so easy to put on, without even thinking about whether they're good behaviours or whether they're bad behaviours, whether they're beneficial behaviours or whether they're corrupt behaviours. We just slip them on automatically without engaging our minds because they're comfortable and familiar. Straight after talking about putting off the old self and putting on the new self, Paul says these words. He says, "Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbour, for we are all members of one body." So we're not in this process of spiritual transformation on our own. We're in this process together. And Paul reminds us that we're members of a body. The analogy here is that we've all been put together to form this composite body of Christ. So we all have these different gifts and stories and talents and uniquenesses, and God kind of puts us together to form this one body. And in different parts of the scriptures, it says, the eye can't say to the foot or the hand, you can't start dissing each other because you're different parts of the body. You form one body together. You're interdependent in this process of becoming more like Jesus. But when we start following Jesus, no one comes into our lives and does a life laundry, do they? No one comes into our life and gets into our spiritual wardrobe and starts clearing stuff out. That doesn't happen in that way. We bring our old selves into our new life with Jesus. No one kind of presses the refresh button and deletes all your history and you start again. You bring all your old self with you into your new life. So when you open your spiritual wardrobe, you've got all your clothing from the past and you've got all your new clothing that God is kind of bringing into your life. Both coexist next to each other. All that old stuff is still hanging there next to the new stuff. And so when we kind of open our spiritual wardrobe in the morning, we look in, we may reach for something from the old self because it's comfortable and familiar with us, rather than reaching for something that we think God is trying to draw us into in the form of the new self. And that's where being part of a community, being part of a body, a church, is really helpful. Because we need people around us who can be loving and honest with us about how we're dressed, what we're carrying, how we're acting, how we're living out our faith. Putting off falsehood, which is what Paul talks about here, is about being willing to be fully known in a community, being vulnerable, being honest, and letting people see us as we are, letting people see the work in progress that we are, and being committed to going into a deeper level of relationship together. Let me explain using a diagram. I'm going to use this pyramid. So at the base level of relationships, we can be transparent with each other. Being transparent with each other is mainly about sharing information. So we're very good at having conversations where we talk about where we've been, where we're going, what we're planning to do, why we're planning to do it. We're very good at sharing information at a transparent level. We can kind of do that really well. We can do that well in church. We can do that well in our workplaces or our social gatherings. We're very good at being transparent with each other. And the reason we're good at being transparent is because it doesn't take a lot of energy. It doesn't take a lot of effort to share your plans, what you've done, what you're planning to do, where you're going. All these things can flow quite easily between us. The interesting thing about being transparent is you can be transparent without being honest, which is the next level of sharing. You can be transparent without really being honest about your life and what's going on in your life, because honesty requires a deeper level of sharing. Honesty requires being truthful about things, even if they're uncomfortable or they make us feel a bit vulnerable. And this isn't about honesty in a sense of I'm right and you're wrong, or being ungracious or unloving. It's about having people around us that we can really share openly with and honestly with about what's going on in our lives. And also people who can be honest with us. There's this reciprocation about being honest. And we all need, really, if we're going to have healthy relationships, people we can be honest with. We need people who can lovingly tell us when our spiritual trainers have gone over, don't we? Because if we've gone nose blind in a certain area of our life and we're doing something that we don't recognise isn't great or isn't beneficial, we need people around who can say, Ross, you need to look at that because you might not realise, but that's really not great. That's a corrupt behaviour that you've carried over in some way or you're repeating. And so we need those people around us who can be honest with us. Proverbs 27:6 says this. It says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. So would you rather have a loving friend who's willing to have tough conversations with you, honest conversations with you, or would you rather surround yourself with people who just say what they think you want to hear? That's what's been captured here in the Proverbs. Sometimes honesty, truth can be a little bit painful. It can create a wound, to use the language here. But if it's done and it comes from a person, a friend who's got your best interest at heart, then it's more beneficial than having enemies who would just shower you with kisses, would just tell you what they think you wanted to hear, to ingratiate themselves to you. So honesty, it can be tough, but I think part of what we want to achieve in Riverside is have people who love each other enough to have the tough conversations with each other when necessary. Gracious, loving, honest conversations. But there's another level on our pyramid. And the top level on our pyramid is to be authentic. Authentic is about really being genuine, being true to who you are, true to what you carry, the values and the beliefs that you carry. It's the lining up of the inward you and the outward you. So both are actually together. So you're living out of your values, you're living out of your beliefs. And you can't be authentic without being transparent and honest first. Authenticity only flows out of that base of transparency and honesty. And that's why it sits at the top of this pyramid here. And at Riverside, we want to aim for these higher levels of relating. We want to risk going deeper with each other to create these deeper levels of honest, authentic relationships, because we believe they reflect the heart of God. They reflect God's desire for the way he wants church community to operate and function. We want to try and push into just past transparency, where we can just share facts about ourselves, into this honesty and authenticity. That's what we're aiming for. And we recognise we can only really do this well when we do it together in community. And that's why we've put there, rather than being independent, we want to be interdependent, which means we need each other. We rely on each other to go deeper with God and deeper with each other. In the earlier part of this letter to the Ephesians, Paul writes these words. He says, instead, speaking the truth in love, we'll grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So Paul, again, using this analogy of the body to describe the church community growing together, holding together, joined together. You'll see it's joined in love. It's the truth has been spoken in love, and the body is growing up in love as each part does its work. And when preachers normally speak on this passage, they talk a lot about the work being the ministries or the gifts that people carry in the life of the church, the different things the church can do. But I think a lot of the work in this passage is the relationship between people in church. A lot of the work that we need to do is how we relate together in church community, how we speak and act in love towards one another. Because that's where the testing of our spiritual transformation really gets worked out. Are we becoming more Christ-like in the way that we treat each other, in the way that we speak to each other, in the way we think about each other? Is the church creating this safe, loving, growing environment that God intended? It really is where the rubber hits the road. And I think, for me, this is the work that God is encouraging us into. So when we come together at Riverside, we try to be honest, we try to be authentic, we try to be interdependent, we try to recognize our need of each other, because we believe this reflects the new self that God is bringing to all of us. This is part of the putting on of the new self that God has called us to. And we believe that church is the best place to actually begin to live out this transformation. Now, it's tricky because being honest and being authentic is scary. It feels risky, because a lot of our time we spend kind of hiding behind the things that we create to make us feel comfortable in the world. We've got these various layers of defense and protection that we've created. So to actually come to places where we start to be really honest, we start to be really authentic, it can take some work. It's a challenging thing to do. And that's why it doesn't happen very easily. It's very easy to do church in a way that's just transparent, that's just kind of functional, where we all say the things to each other that we want to hear, and we all just, we get along fine. But that doesn't really produce the transformation that Paul is talking about here. So, when's the last time you risked a bit of honesty in a conversation? When's the last time you risked a bit of authenticity in a conversation? Talking about how you really felt or what was really going on for you. Were you able to find someone who you knew loved you enough to be able to handle that, to have that conversation with you? Or was it much easier to just be transparent with them, just talk about what you'd done and what you were going to do, and what the week held, and what kind of a diary download, more than what was really going on inside? We said these are aspirational statements for us, but we love to keep journeying up that pyramid together. And we can't do it with everybody. You can't be, open with everybody in church. That's why we have life groups where there's smaller settings for people to really go deeper together. You can't just bare your soul to everybody, but you do need places and people where you can go deeper, where you can be more honest, where you know that you're accepted and loved and cared for, even when you are willing to risk, showing people more of yourself. Disclosing can feel risky, can feel scary, and even admitting your need of somebody else can feel quite a vulnerable thing to do. You might have spent a lot of time, trying to make yourself as independent as possible, trying to make yourself as strong as possible, but we're called to be interdependent in the way that we live. We're called to really express a need of one another. But that can be a risky thing to do, particularly if you've experienced rejection in your life. This is the way that God's ordained for us to grow up together. He put us in this thing called church, and he kind of encourages us to go deeper together as we go deeper with him. So for us as Riverside, we want to be people who are honest, we want to be people who are authentic, and we want to be people who are interdependent. Paul says, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. And that's our goal, isn't it? That together, as church community, we will grow to become, in every respect, mature. God's got us on this growth curve where we're growing up together, we're maturing together, we're becoming more like him together. That's what we want, isn't it? To grow, to become more like Jesus in every area of our lives. And so God puts us in this sandbox called the church, where we get to work it out together. We get to work out our faith together. We get to road test it, to see whether it's true. Are these principles that Jesus talked about, do they work? Does this spirit that Jesus promises, is it powerful enough and active enough to bring about transformation together? So I want to encourage you as you reach into your spiritual wardrobe this week, as you open the doors and you look across all the things, maybe the stuff there hanging there from your old self that's still quite prevalent, behaviours, attitudes, thoughts, habits, still quite prevalent, still quite, inviting. And then you've got your new self wardrobe, the stuff that God is bringing into your life that may feel a bit more awkward to put on, may feel not quite so familiar. Which side are you going to draw from? Are you going to put off the old self and put on the new? Or are you going to reach for those things that are more familiar? Because Paul says it's in the attitude of our minds that these things are won and lost. We make a choice. We actively say, I'm not going to put that on. I am going to put that on. We don't just sleepwalk into what we're wearing. We make a choice. And it's about being active in your minds again, being renewed in your minds, remembering what God has called you to. So you can be active this week in saying, no, even though it feels comfortable and familiar, I'm not going to put it on because it's not helpful to me. It's not helpful to the people around me. In fact, God just showed me what a corrupt pair of trainers it really is. Show me, reveal to me just what it is and how bad it smells. But I am going to put this on because this is fresh and new and is reminiscent of you and it's the way you want me to walk. And it may feel a bit strange and I may feel a bit self-conscious, but that's what I'm going to put on. In the attitude of our mind. If you're able, why don't you stand with me? And a great place to try out your new wardrobe is in church. So maybe that means you come to a Sunday with a slightly different attitude. You come with a slightly different perspective. You come with I'm going to serve someone today. I'm going to bless someone today. I'm going to think about someone differently today. And so you're getting to test out that new self. You're getting to road test it. I'm going to go and choose to speak to someone I haven't spoken to. I'm going to choose to pray for someone. I'm going to choose to give a word at the front like these guys did courageously today. I'm going to try and road test my faith. I'm going to see how this spiritual transformation plays out. So let's pray.